A very warm welcome to you. We are so glad you have chosen to spend a little of your time with us here in this quiet space. One does hope you find it comfortable. This story has been crafted with a simple, gentle purpose in mind, to be a soft place for your thoughts to land, a quiet path to walk as the day ends, and perhaps to help guide you toward the peaceful rest you so richly deserve. Before our tale begins and you settle in to listen, we have just one small, quiet request. If you find a moment of peace within this story, we would be so very grateful if you would like this tale and subscribe to our quiet little corner of the world so that we might continue to share these peaceful journeys with you. And now, there is nothing more to be done but to breathe slowly. Let the world outside fade and allow the story to begin. Chapter 1. The Sunken Doorway. One can never quite say they have found a Scriptorium, you understand? It is more that, after a time, the path simply decides to lead you there. For Phelan, the change was a subtle one, a slow and gentle softening of the world around him. The rough, rambling track he had been following for days seemed to smooth itself out, the sharp little stones giving way to a fine, pale gravel that hushed his footsteps into a soft, rhythmic shushing. The air, which had been full of the busy drone of insects and the chatter of unseen birds, grew still, holding a quietness that felt ancient and profound, as if the very sound of the world had been respectfully tucked away for a nap. Ahead, nestled into a hillside so green it seemed to be dreaming of springtime, was a low, curving wall of pale, creamy white stone. It did not stand upon the hill so much as grow out of it, its lines soft and flowing, as though shaped by water and time rather than a builder's hand. At its center was a great arching doorway, dark and welcoming. It was a sunken doorway set deep into the earth, and to approach it felt not like entering a building, but like finding the entrance to a peaceful burrow, a safe and quiet place to shelter from a world that could sometimes be a little too much. He paused before it, noticing for the first time the scent that drifted out to greet him. It was a fragrance unlike any other, a comforting blend of things that had no business being together, yet formed a perfect harmony. There was the clean, dry scent of very old paper, the kind found in books that have been read and cherished for centuries. Woven through it was a thread of sweet, warm spice, something like cassia bark left to warm in the sun, and beneath it all was the foundational scent of cool, damp earth and clean stone, a smell that spoke of deep, unwavering peace. Stepping through the archway, Phelan felt the last vestiges of the outside world fall away like a heavy cloak. Inside, the silence was a tangible thing, a soft, heavy blanket that settled over his shoulders and seemed to coax the tension from them. The light was gentle, filtering down from unseen openings high above, illuminating a space that was both vast and cozy. The walls were lined with towering shelves of a pale smooth wood, though they held not a single book. The floor was made of the same cream-colored stone as the entrance, worn smooth in pathways by the passage of countless quiet feet. His own room was easy to find, the first along a gently curving corridor. The door was a thick slice of pale wood without a latch or lock, and it swung open with a soft sighing sound. The room was simple, a perfect picture of restful utility. A bed had been carved from what seemed to be a single enormous piece of light-colored wood, its surface polished to a gentle sheen by time and touch. Upon it lay a quilt, thick and inviting, its fabric the color of a faded sky, and so soft it seemed to absorb the very light around it. A single wide window containing no glass looked out not onto the world outside, but into an enclosed courtyard where strange large-leafed plants grew in tranquil order. The air that drifted in was still and carried the scent of chamomile and warm dust. Phelan ran a hand over the smooth, cool wood of the bed frame, its solidity a quiet promise of steady, uninterrupted rest. He felt the weight of his long journey not as a burden, but as a reason, a gentle logic that had led him finally to this place. He did not feel the need to unpack his small satchel, or to do anything at all, really. The room itself was a quiet invitation to simply be. He sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the soft quilt yield beneath him, and looked out at the peaceful courtyard. The leaves of the plants were the size of dinner plates, with a texture that looked almost like vellum. A single fat bumblebee drifted lazily between them, its low hum a perfect counterpoint to the profound silence. Phelan drew in a long, slow breath, and as he exhaled, it felt as though he were releasing not just air, but weeks of travel, of dust and noise and effort. The air he drew back in was the air of the Scriptorium, clean and quiet, and full of a peace that was as real and solid as the stone walls around him. He felt, for the first time in a very long while, that he had well and truly arrived. Chapter 2. The Ink of Quietude. The next morning, Phelan woke not to a sound, but to a subtle shift in the quality of the light. The gentle, diffuse glow filtering into his room had softened, carrying with it a delicate warmth that felt like a kind hand on his shoulder. He had slept deeply, a dreamless and restorative slumber that left his limbs feeling pleasantly heavy, and his mind as clear and still as a pool of water on a windless day. Following the gentle, curving corridor, he found his way to a large, round room at the heart of the Scriptorium. It was here he first met Iona. She was standing by a low, circular table, her back to him, her movements slow and deliberate as she tended to a small earthenware pot. She was not a person one would ever startle, for her presence was as quiet and integrated into the space as the stone and wood itself. When she turned, her smile was small and genuine, a simple acknowledgement of his presence. There was no need for formal introductions or explanations. The Scriptorium did not stand on such ceremony. Instead, she simply gestured to a second cushion by the table, a quiet invitation to join her. Iona was preparing tea, and the ritual was a lesson in gentle mindfulness. The leaves were not like any Phelan had seen before. They were tightly furled little spheres. As she poured warm water from a simple stone kettle into two small handleless cups, the spheres began to slowly, gracefully unfurl like tiny ferns waking from a long sleep. The movement released the most wonderfully delicate fragrance into the air, a scent of warm honey, new grass, and a faint, almost floral sweetness. They drank in companionable silence, the tea warming their hands through the thick ceramic, its taste as gentle and comforting as its aroma. After a time, Iona turned her attention to the other objects on the table. There was a stack of blank pages, each one thick and soft with the texture of fine cotton. Next to them sat a pot of ink, but it was an ink of a kind Phelan could not have imagined. It was a swirling, silvery liquid that seemed to hold its own internal light, shimmering with the soft iridescence of a pearl. And beside that lay a quill, but it was not made from a feather. It was a single smooth piece of dark, polished wood, shaped and weighted to fit perfectly in the hand. This, she explained in a voice as soft as the rustle of turning pages, was the purpose of the archives. This was the Ink of Quietude. It was not, she murmured, for the writing of stories, but for the gentle release of them. With a grace born of long practice, she dipped the tip of the smooth quill into the shimmering silvery ink. She held it poised for a moment above one of the soft blank pages, her eyes closed in quiet concentration. Phelan could feel a subtle shift in the air, a sense of gentle energy being drawn toward the quill. Iona was not writing, but simply reflecting, allowing a simple, happy memory, the particular warmth of the sun on a favorite stone in the courtyard, to fill her mind. As she did, the silvery ink flowed from the quill onto the page below. It did not form words or pictures, but rather a soft, abstract pattern of swirling light, a delicate nebula of silver on the creamy surface of the paper. It glowed there for a long, peaceful moment, a silent testament to a small, cherished thought. And then, as gracefully as it had appeared, the pattern began to fade, the light softened, the silver threads dissolved, and within moments, the page was as blank and untouched as it had been before. Phelan stared, captivated. The page was pristine, yet the very air in the room felt subtly different, lighter, clearer. Iona smiled her small, serene smile. The archive, she explained, did not destroy thoughts or memories, but simply unburdened the mind of their weight. A worry, a persistent sorrow, a memory too heavy to carry. One could place it on the page, watch it be held for a moment, and then let it go, returning it to the quietness from which it came. He looked from the empty page to the pot of shimmering ink, and then to Iona's calm, peaceful face. He was beginning to understand that this place was not merely a sanctuary of silence, but a place of active, gentle healing. It offered a magic that was not grand or spectacular, but as subtle and profound as a slow, deep breath. The simple, kind wonder of it filled him with a sense of peace that was deeper than any he had found in sleep. Chapter 3. Tending the Paper Gardens. Phelan's days soon settled into a rhythm as gentle and unhurried as the drifting sunlight in the courtyard. He discovered that he was not a guest in the Scriptorium, so much as a temporary part of its quiet life, and he was offered the simple, profound pleasure of a gentle task. His work, if such a peaceful activity could be called work, was to tend the paper gardens, the enclosed courtyard he had first seen from his window. It was here that the great flora plants grew, their enormous vellum-like leaves, the source of the pages used in the archives. The task was wonderfully simple. Each morning, armed with a soft, lint-free cloth, he would visit the courtyard. The air there was always a little warmer, thick with the comforting scent of chamomile and dry, sun-baked earth. He would approach one of the large plants, whose woody stems were as smooth and pale as birch, and begin to polish its leaves. The act was a meditation in itself. He would wipe the broad, creamy surface with slow, circular motions, feeling the slightly pliant texture beneath the cloth, like well-loved leather. The simple, repetitive movement was deeply soothing, a physical act that required no thought, only presence. A remarkable thing happened as he worked. As the cloth moved over the leaf, the plant would respond by producing a low, resonant hum. It was not just a sound to be heard, but a feeling, a gentle vibration that traveled up his arms and settled deep in his chest, like the purr of some great contented creature. Each plant had a slightly different tone, and as he moved from one to the next, he created a shifting, harmonious chord of quiet sound that filled the courtyard with a palpable sense of peace and well-being. At the base of the flora, nestled amongst their thick, woody roots, grew another of the Scriptorium's gentle wonders, the luminous moss. It grew in thick, soft clumps, its texture like the plushest of carpets. During the day, it was a deep, restful green, but in the shaded corners of the courtyard, it emitted a soft internal glow. The light was a warm, golden white, and it pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm, like a sleeping heart. Phelan found that if he sat quietly near a patch of the moss, his own breathing would unconsciously begin to sync with its gentle, luminous pulse, slowing down, deepening, without any effort on his part. After polishing the leaves, he would water the plants. He drew cool, clear water from a wide, shallow basin carved from a single dark stone. The water was so still, it perfectly mirrored the soft gray sky above. He used a simple ladle carved from a gourd, pouring the water gently around the base of each plant. The sound was a soft, gurgling whisper, a drink being gratefully received by the thirsty roots. The scent of damp earth would rise up, rich and clean, a smell of life and gentle growth. These simple grounding tasks became the anchor of his days, the quiet focus required, the feel of the cloth, the sound of the hum, the sight of the pulsing light, the scent of the water on the earth, left little room for the noisy, restless thoughts that had accompanied him for so long. He was not trying to empty his mind or force it into stillness. The stillness was simply arriving, a natural consequence of tending to a garden that was, in its own quiet way, also tending to him. He would often end his mornings sitting on a smooth stone bench, warmed by a patch of sun, simply observing. He watched the way the diffuse light made the veins on a flora leaf look like a delicate pale map. He listened to the contented buzzing of a bee as it investigated a patch of moss. He felt the soft, warm breeze carrying the scent of old paper and living things drift across his skin. In the quiet rhythm of the garden, he was finding a rhythm of his own. Chapter 4. A Page Untouched. After many days of finding peace in the garden, Phelan felt a quiet internal shift. It was not a decision, but a gentle readiness, a sense that the time had come. That evening, he made his way not to the dining hall for his simple meal, but back to the round chamber at the Scriptorium's heart. The room was empty, save for the quiet objects waiting on the low table. A fire had been lit in the hearth, its embers glowing a deep and comforting rose gold. The only sound was their soft, papery crackle, a sound that seemed to speak the very language of this place. He chose a chair, a tall, high-backed seat carved from a single piece of dark, smooth wood. It was surprisingly comfortable, its curves seeming to know the shape of a body seeking rest. For a long while he simply sat, feeling the gentle warmth of the fire on one side and the cool, still air of the room on the other. He watched the luminous moss in a nearby alcove pulse its slow, golden light, the rhythm of familiar, calming friend. The deep, steady peace of the room settled over him, not as a silence to be filled, but as a presence to be shared. Finally, he leaned forward. His movements were unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world, which, in this place, felt entirely true. He picked up a single sheet of paper from the stack. It had come from a leaf he himself had polished that morning, and he recognized its faint, unique pattern of veins. The page felt warm in his hands, soft and yielding, a surface that invited not words but release. He then took the smooth, featherless quill, its dark wood cool and solid, against his fingertips. He dipped the quill into the pot of silvery, shimmering ink. The liquid clung to the tip, swirling with a soft internal light. He held it over the page just as he had seen Iona do, and closed his eyes. He did not try to summon a specific memory or a particular worry. He knew that trying to grasp a thought was like trying to catch water in your fist. Instead, he simply created an open space in his mind, a quiet invitation for whatever needed to be released. He thought of the long road behind him, not of its specific twists and turns, but of the general, undefined weight of the journey itself. He thought of the quiet weariness that had settled in his bones, the dust of many miles that had gathered not just on his cloak, but in the corners of his mind. He did not fight these feelings or analyze them. He simply acknowledged their presence, and with a slow, steady exhalation, he allowed them to flow from his mind down through the quiet attention in his arm, through his hand, and into the waiting ink. He opened his eyes. The ink was flowing onto the page, creating a vast and complex pattern. It was not the simple, happy swirl he had seen Iona create, but a hazy, intricate web of silver light, like frost spreading across a window pane. It filled the page, shimmering with a soft, cool luminescence. It held there for a long, silent moment, a beautiful, tangible representation of a burden he had not even known how to name. He watched it, his heart quiet, his breath still. Then, with a slowness that felt profoundly kind, it began to fade. The intricate lines softened at the edges. The cool light warmed and then dissolved, and the silver haze retreated from the edges of the page toward the center. It vanished, not all at once, but in a gentle receding tide, until all that was left was a single shimmering point of light in the center of the page. That too winked out, and the page was clean, blank, untouched. Phelan looked at the empty surface and felt a corresponding sensation within himself. A gentle, peaceful emptiness, a sense of lightness in his shoulders, and a quiet in his head that was vast and clear and wonderfully new. Chapter 5. The Scent of Clean Stone. On the morning Phelan knew he would leave, the air had clean, sweet scent of rain-washed stone. A soft shower had passed over the Scriptorium in the deepest part of the night, and now the whole world seemed freshly laundered and new. He walked through the familiar curving corridors, his soft-soled shoes making no sound on the cool stone floors. He was not walking as a visitor now, but as one who knew the quiet language of the place, one who was a part of its gentle and unending rhythm. He ran his hand along the smooth, pale wood of the empty shelves, feeling the fine grain and the loving polish of generations. He breathed in the familiar, comforting scent of old paper and cassia bark, committing it not to memory, but to a feeling deep within him. He passed the room of the archives, where the pot of silvery ink sat waiting, still and patient. He felt no need to use it again. The lightness it had granted him remained, a quiet, buoyant presence in his chest. In the dining hall, Iona was already there, a pot of the gently unfurling tea steaming between them on the table. No words were needed to announce his departure. The Scriptorium knew. They shared the tea in their usual companionable silence, a silence that was now filled with a sense of shared contentment and peaceful farewell. The warmth of the cup in his hands was a simple, profound comfort, a final gift of the sanctuary's hearth. Iona gave him a small parting nod, her serene smile conveying all the good wishes in the world. He went to the paper garden one last time. The leaves of the papyrus flora were beaded with tiny, perfect globes of rainwater, each one holding a tiny, distorted reflection of the soft gray sky. The luminous moss glowed with a gentle, contented light, and the air was rich with the smell of damp, happy earth. He did not feel a sense of loss at leaving this place, for he had come to understand that its gift was not something you could lose. It was not a memory to be clung to, but a state of being to be carried. As he stood at the sunken doorway, ready to step back into the world, he realized what he was taking with him. It was not a collection of souvenirs or stories. It was the feeling of a quiet mind. It was the sensation of a slow, easy breath. It was the memory of the luminous moss pulsing in time with his own heartbeat. He was carrying the silence of the archives within him, a portable sanctuary he could return to with a single mindful thought. He placed his palm flat against the cool, smooth stone of the great archway. He felt its ancient, steady presence, its unwavering calm, and offered it a silent, heartfelt thank you. Then he turned and stepped out of the Scriptorium's gentle shade. The world outside seemed different now. The bird song was not a clamor, but a melody. The light was not harsh, but simply bright. The path ahead was not a challenge, but simply a way forward. He walked on, his pack feeling immeasurably lighter, his footsteps sure and slow, carrying the profound and simple piece of a page left perfectly, beautifully, untouched.